I was balancing a basket of laundry and a list of chores longer than my arm when my son showed up to help. I thought it would be a quick fix the hinge, tighten the faucet kind of day. I didn't expect him to bring flowers. I definitely didn't expect the words that followed, the ones that loosened a knot I'd been carrying in my chest for years, the ones that changed how I see myself and him, and what family means when the kids aren't really kids anymore. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Which city are you in tonight? I love seeing those check-ins: Phoenix, Pittsburgh, Savannah, the little towns nobody ever puts on a postcard. It makes this feel like we're all sitting at the same kitchen table. It was one of those blue-skied Saturdays that pretends to be summer even though the calendar insists it's spring. The kind of day when the sunlight seems to lift dust from the floorboards and make it shimmer just to taunt you. I had my hair pinned up with the same old clip I use for painting and cleaning. My reading glasses slid down my nose, and a mission that involved the laundry room, the wobbly cabinet hinge, and the box of Christmas lights that somehow never walks itself back to the garage. I'd already brewed a second pot of coffee because a day like that needs reinforcement. I heard the familiar thump of size 12 footsteps, and then my son's voice drifting in from the back door, casual as a breeze. "Hey, Mom." He'd let himself in, the way he always does, like the house still recognizes his weight on the floorboards, and the handle remembers the shape of his hand. He's 26 now, grown in the way a tree is grown, meaning you see the age in the rings, not the leaves. He's taller than his father ever was, shoulders broad from a job that keeps him on construction sites more than at desks. But when he grins, I still catch flashes of the 8-year-old who once taped a paper crown to his forehead and declared himself king of the living room. "You picked a good day to help," I said, trying not to sound too needy. "There's a careful dance you do as a mother with an adult son. You want to ask, you want to lean, but you don't want to become a weight he has to lift." He lifted the toolbox with one hand, doing that lazy show-off thing men do when a weight feels good in their grip. "Let's see this hinge," he said, and we walked to the cabinet like partners headed to the same song. We moved through the morning like two people who know the house the way old friends know each other, without needing to ask where the light switch is. He replaced the hinge in 5 minutes flat, and then, with an exaggerated bow, announced that he'd tackle the faucet too. We laughed more than the tasks deserved. And somewhere between the squeak of old screws and the metallic cough of the faucet's first obedient turn, I felt something shift, the slight click of a new rhythm settling in where the old one used to be. He wasn't my small boy trailing me from room to room anymore. He wasn't a guest either. He was a man, and he had come to stand beside me. We took a break on the back steps. The sun warmed the wood, and the yard had that early season look, grass fresh as a shave, garden fence still holding winter's memory in its gray-green. He asked how I was, but not the way you ask in passing. He looked straight at me, and I could see the man he is in his steady gaze. "I'm good," I said, then admitted, "the house is a lot some days." He nodded without rushing to fix the feeling. I loved him for that. It's funny. There were years I would have sold my best set of casserole dishes for a pause like that, when he was a teenager and every conversation seemed to be a sprint through a storm. We ran to the hardware store, him driving, because his truck has more room for lumber and good intentions. I sat in the passenger seat like I'd been waiting for that spot to become mine again. At the store, he zigzagged through aisles that smell like sawdust and possibility, tossing plumber's tape and a new filter into the cart, like a magician pulling confidence from a sleeve. He teased me about my list, which was written in my best careful handwriting on the kind of notepad you get free from the pharmacy. Magnet on the back, a picture of a cartoon pill bottle in the corner. "You know, we could probably do half of this with duct tape," he said. "And some prayer." I swatted his arm with the list. Small, silly, warm, like the ache of stretching a muscle you haven't used in a while. Back home, we fell into the kind of work that makes noise but requires very little talking. Tightening, wiping, carrying, folding. He hoisted the Christmas lights onto the top shelf of the garage and teased me again about keeping so many strands. Every single one works, I said, which was partly true and partly about how it feels to let go of things that have known your winters. He didn't argue. He just made sure the box sat safely, lid snug, corners square to the wall like a promise. At some point, he disappeared. It wasn't like him to vanish in the middle of a job, so I assumed he'd stepped out to take a call. I went back to the laundry room and started sorting towels with that focused calm that comes when a day is shaped by simple tasks. The light through the high window slid across the tile like a gold ribbon. I could hear the muted tick of the kitchen clock, the hum of the fridge, the world made small and manageable. Then the back door creaked again, and he stepped in, clearing his throat in the theatrical way kids do when they're about to make a presentation. In his hands was a grocery bag, the kind with the store's logo in red. He set it on the counter and began to unload like he was staging a magic trick. A bottle of the fancy dish soap I never buy for myself, a fresh sponge, a loaf of crusty bread, a little wedge of cheese wrapped in paper like a secret. And then, last, a bouquet of supermarket flowers. Nothing expensive, just yellow daisies and white alstroemeria with their delicate freckles, tied with a twist of raffia. He looked suddenly shy, eyes sliding sideways like he was 13 again, and asking for the car keys. For the woman who wrangled me into brushing my teeth and saying thank you, he said, and for the house that kept my feet warm and my stomach full. He paused, swallowed. And for the person who taught me what showing up looks like. I don't know why it hit me the way it did. Maybe it was the daisies, cheerful, unpretentious, the way joy looks when it's not trying to be flawless. Maybe it was that he'd thought of soap and sponges right alongside bread and cheese, care stitched to comfort. But the words settled into me like rain on a dry garden. I felt that quick, startling sting behind my eyes, the one that warns you a tear might be coming whether you want it to or not. You didn't have to, I managed, and he gave me a look that said, for once, he knew exactly what those 4 words really mean. He reached for the vase I keep above the fridge. Heavy blue glass, a dollar store treasure, and held it under the tap, filling it until the water hummed against the sides. He trimmed the stems with the steady hands I watched years ago as he learned to tie his shoes, to cut paper hearts, to handle the too sharp corners of growing up. He arranged the flowers without fuss, not trying to make them perfect. They landed in the vase with the ease of something that belongs. We moved to the table where afternoon light lays itself down like a nap. He broke the bread, I sliced the cheese, and we ate more quietly than we usually do. Sometimes the best conversations are carried on the back of silence. The bouquet stood between us, a bright little sun. I could smell the faint green of stems and the lemon-clean note of the soap he bought, standing on the counter in its tidy bottle like a small upgrade on an ordinary life. "Mom," he said finally, and I looked up. His voice had that rough edge it gets when he cares too much and is trying not to sound like it. I haven't always been easy. I know that. There were times I made you feel like you were on the wrong team. He took a breath. But I see it now. The way you did the unglamorous stuff. The quiet, constant stuff. I see it. Gentlemen watching this, if you've ever had a moment where you suddenly see your parents in a different light, like you're looking at a photo and the focus sharpens, then you know the feeling I had then. I wanted to reach across the table and fix every memory between us with a single touch. I wanted to go back to the nights I waited up and the mornings I packed lunches and tell that younger version of me. It will all mean something one day, more than the grade he got on the test or whether the bed got made before the school bus came. "I'm proud of you," I said, not because it's a thing a mother is supposed to say, but because it was the truest sentence in the room. He nodded, eyes shiny in a way he wouldn't want me to remark on. So I didn't. I reached over, squeezed his hand, and he let me. That felt like a ceremony we'd both been waiting to invent, a quiet mutual agreement that the distance of the teenage years had been crossed, that the bridge holds. After we ate, he insisted on finishing the rest of the list. We oiled the back door so it stopped complaining every time the wind visited. We tested the smoke detectors, which sang their shrill little warnings like impatient birds. He even cleaned the lint trap in the dryer with a seriousness that made me laugh. "It's the leading cause of household fires," he said, parroting some article he must have read. "Look at you," I teased, quoting statistics like a public service announcement. He bowed again, ridiculous and dear. I put the flowers on the kitchen windowsill, where they could catch the late light and make the whole room look like it had remembered something joyful. Every time I turned back from the sink, there they were, a little flag waving for all that goes unsaid. I realized the gift wasn't just the bouquet. It was the thought stitched into it, the errand run without fanfare, the groceries chosen to lighten my evening, and most of all, the words he'd chosen to hand me like something I could keep. The longer you live, the more you understand that the best gifts aren't grand gestures. They're the ordinary moments that land exactly where you needed them. A hand on your shoulder when you're strong enough to lift the box but tired of doing it alone. A sentence that arrives right when you were wondering if anyone noticed. The flowers would fade, of course. That's their honest job. But the moment had a sturdier stem. I felt taller standing next to it. By dusk, the house had that good, worked-on feeling. The faucet was obedient, the hinge respectful, the list with more check marks than empty boxes. We stood on the porch, watching the sky pinken at the edges like a blushed cheek. Somewhere down the street a lawn-mower finished its last strip and clicked off, and the sudden quiet felt like a soft blanket. He leaned on the railing and told me about his latest project, how they were framing a little house for a couple just starting out, how he liked seeing something rise where yesterday there was only dirt. "It's a good feeling," he said. "You know, to build something that's going to hold." I looked at him then and thought, that's what we've been doing all day, and for years before that. Hammering our way through misunderstandings, shoring up what wobbled, choosing again and again to be a structure that could hold both our weight. I told him so, and he laughed, embarrassed but pleased, like I'd given him a compliment he didn't know how to pocket. When he hugged me goodbye, he smelled like clean sweat and sawdust and the outside air. He held on half a second longer than usual. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said, almost as if he was asking permission. "If that's okay. There's something else I want to do." I raised an eyebrow, because mystery looks good on him but not on my calendar. "You'll see," he added, a flash of that boyish grin lighting up the man's face. After he left, I made myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the purple settle over the yard. The flowers glowed quietly in their blue vase, like a lighthouse lantern left on low. I thought about the long line of mothers and sons before us, how they must have had their own afternoons of hinges and faucets, their own kitchens where words finally landed and stayed. I thought about the men watching this right now from Denver or Detroit, or a place with one stoplight and a diner that knows your order. How some of you might be holding a story that wants to be told, or a sentence you haven't said yet to the woman who raised you. I hope you'll say it. We don't always need diamonds or tickets to Paris. Sometimes a supermarket bouquet and the courage to speak the truth will crack something open in the best way. I rinsed the mugs, set them upside down to dry, and turned off the kitchen light. The room went soft, the kind of dark that makes the bright things brighter. I stood a moment longer than necessary, listening to the house sigh in that way old houses do, a satisfied exhale after a day well used. It felt like the first page of a new chapter I hadn't realized we were ready to write. "Tomorrow," he said, "there's something else I want to do." And you know what? For the first time in a long time, I didn't worry about what it might be. I just felt ready to open the door again, ready to set another place at the table, ready to see what kind of gift could mean even more than flowers. The next day arrived with the kind of soft morning light that slips through curtains like a whispered promise. I woke earlier than usual, almost as if my body remembered my son's words before my mind did. "There's something else I want to do." I padded into the kitchen, the blue vase still holding yesterday's bouquet. The daisies had opened a little wider overnight, petals reaching toward the window, as if even flowers know how to lean into possibility. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table, feeling that rare mix of peace and anticipation, like a page waiting for the next line. By mid-morning, I heard the familiar sound of his truck pulling into the driveway. My heart did the same little jump it used to do when he'd come home from high school football games, sweaty and tired but grinning. He came in carrying a bundle of things I couldn't quite make out at first: wood slats, paint cans, brushes sticking out from a bag. "Morning, Mom," he said, dropping a quick kiss on my cheek. "Hope you're ready to get your hands dirty again." I raised an eyebrow. "After yesterday, I thought you'd need a week to recover from all the chores." He laughed, that deep, rolling sound that feels like sunlight in my chest. "Nah, yesterday reminded me of something. There's a project I've been meaning to do with you, not for you. Big difference." He carried everything to the backyard, where the old garden fence stood leaning slightly, its boards weathered and graying. I had stopped noticing its tilt. It had become part of the landscape, like the creak in the back door or the worn step on the porch. But in his eyes, it was something we could fix together. "We'll rebuild this," he said. "Stronger, straight. Something you can look at and feel proud of every morning." I wanted to tell him I already felt proud, but I held the words. Sometimes love shows itself best when you let someone prove it in their own way. The work was steady and rhythmic. He measured and sawed while I held boards in place, the wood warm in my hands, the scent of fresh-cut pine floating through the yard. We laughed about my crooked attempts with the hammer. "Still better than Dad's aim ever was," I teased, and he shook his head, smiling. Sweat ran down his temple, and I handed him a glass of lemonade, noticing the way his hands dwarfed the glass, the same hands that once reached for mine across a parking lot, sticky with melted popsicle. As the hours passed, neighbors walked by, nodding and waving. One even called out, "Looks like you've got yourself a good helper there." And I thought, not for the first time, how true that was, but also how much more he had become. This wasn't help. This was partnership. This was my son choosing to stand in the place where his childhood once grew, not as a guest, but as a builder of something new. When the last board was set, he stepped back, wiping his brow, and looked at me. "You know, Mom, I used to think helping out here was a chore. I'd roll my eyes, slam doors. I didn't get it. But now, I see what it means. This isn't just a fence. It's you keeping this place alive. It's roots." He paused, his voice softer now. "And I want to be part of that. I don't want you carrying it alone." My throat tightened, the kind of ache that's equal parts joy and sorrow. I thought of all the years when I felt invisible, when the dishes and bills and late-night worries piled higher than I could admit. And here he was, standing tall and sure, telling me he saw it all now. That he saw me. I touched his arm, steadying my voice. "You'll never know how much it means to hear that." He smiled, but this time without the boyish grin. This was a man's smile, weighted with sincerity. He pulled something from behind the tool bag, another bouquet. This one was smaller, roses mixed with sprigs of lavender, wrapped simply in paper. "For round 2, he said. "Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. Yesterday was about thanking you. Today's about showing you I'm here." I laughed, half through tears, shaking my head. "You're going to spoil me." He leaned down, kissed the top of my head, and whispered, "That's the point." We placed the new flowers beside the daisies on the windowsill, 2 vases glowing side by side. The house seemed to exhale, as though it knew something had shifted, no longer just a place where a mother worked and a son once grew, but a space alive with shared care, with roots running both ways. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fence in gold, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the boards stand firm and straight. My son sat beside me, stretching his long legs out, quiet in a way that didn't need words. I thought about all of you watching, men across the country, from Ohio to Texas to small towns tucked between cornfields and rivers. I thought about the mothers in your lives, the ones who folded your shirts and worried about your silence, the ones who maybe never heard you say what was really in your heart. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: don't wait. Don't wait for fences to rot or for years to pass. Don't wait until you're older to say the words you've been carrying. Sometimes it only takes a bouquet of daisies, a rebuilt fence, or a simple, steady sentence to change everything. My son gave me flowers 2 days in a row, but what he really gave me was something far rarer, proof that love can grow again, even after years of silence. And that gift meant more than anything.